Hey everyone, this is Kevin from the chesswebsite.com. We just wrapped up the 2015 Sinquefield Cup. Congratulations to Levon Aronian, who walked away with the victory. Did not honestly expect him to do so well. He went undefeated. He won 3 games and tied 6, so he ended up with 6 points. A lot of people tied for second place with 5 points. 2 of those individuals, Magnus Carlsen and Nakamura, I thought both had a legitimate chance to actually win this tournament. So congratulations to all the competitors. Been a really fun tournament to cover. We've had a lot of videos on YouTube as well as on the site as well. So if you haven't checked all of those, make sure you check them out. But thought it'd be pretty cool to go over the match of the tournament by a long shot. Super exciting match today. If you have not seen it before, it's between Wesley So and Nakamura from round 6. 2 Americans facing off. And this is kind of a heavyweight boxing match where sometimes you see some matches and it's kind of a one guy kind of hanging back, doesn't want to get punched very much. This is just a all-out brawl. Both sides throwing everything they have at their opponents, just trying to go all out. And at the end of the day, we just want to see who's left standing, and that's exactly what we see. So if you're not too familiar with it, you're definitely going to enjoy. But go ahead and get started. Wesley So starts out with pawn to d4, knight f6, pawn c4, pawn g6, knight c3, bishop here to g7, and then after pawn to e4, we go pawn to d6. So this is the King's Indian defense, which typically is more of a passive defense. Nakamura, I was kind of expecting, it's a hyper-modern defense, so he's not really looking to control the center of the board right away. Instead, looking to control the center with his minor pieces. Maybe later on counterattack by pushing forward, pawn here to e5. Maybe if he wants to counterattack on the queen side, pawn here to c5. He has some options here. But it's kind of more of a quiet move. You castle on the king side, get king side safety. There's usually not a lot of threats on board. So as we kind of started, it didn't look like anything was going to happen, but we definitely saw fireworks later on. So continues with knight f3, castle on the king side, bishop here to e2, pawn to e5, as we talked about castle on the king side. So everything looks normal so far. Knight c6, pawn to d5, knight back here to e7. Both sides just simple development moves. Nothing too crazy is going on so far. Knight back here to e2. That signifies that usually white's going to be a little bit more aggressive, start pushing forward with his pawn right here, because his knight is fine position right here, can get his dark square bishop involved into the game. Bishop here to g5, can always start attacking on the king or the queen side. Pawn to a4, start pushing on that side. But knight to e1 somewhat kind of looks like he's going to attack on the king side, pushing his pawn forward. Knight back here to d7 and pawn to f3, and this is kind of what we see in the game. We didn't have to see this. I kind of expected just for white to try to dominate on the queen side, but after pawn here to f3, we see pawn to f5. So you can tell right away that Nakamura is not looking to play a safe game. Usually when you fianchetto your bishop to one side of the board, you usually don't start to push your pawns, especially this early on into the game. So now bishop here to e3. So saying, okay, you're going to attack on the king side. I'm going to go ahead and start lining up all my pieces to attack on the queen side. I'm going to try to overwhelm you on the queen side and then just barrage your king with attacks once I have completely decimated your queen side. Pawn here to f4. Bishop comes back here to f2, making sure still attacking over here on the queen side. Pawn to g5. If you actually analyze this position on board through an engine, if you're kind of watching it maybe through Chess24, they did live commentary, and you can actually see the engines analyzing this. It was showing white ahead by a long shot. It said about 2 points, which really that equates to either 2 pawns if you're just looking at equal sides of the board with pawns off. But really it just comes down to white's in a pretty dominant position. Usually if you're up by 2 points, you're going to go on to win pretty easily. Nakamura has other plans though. He's going to just try to be super aggressive and see if he can just overwhelm his opponent. So pawn to g5. No regard for king side safety, and that's okay. Knight here to d3, knight over here to g6, pawn pushing to c5. So So's going to go ahead and continue with his plan on the queen side. He has a huge majority over here. His pawns are kind of facing that way, so that's kind of where he's looking to go. It's going to be very easy for him to overwhelm Nakamura on the queen side. Knight over here to f6, rook to c1, just getting ready to even push further, add more pressure on that side. Rook here to f7. king over here to h1. I don't think there's much gain by Wesley Snow playing king to h1. He's not really under pressure right now. I think probably makes more sense to just continue to be aggressive. Pawn to a4. Just keep pushing forward. Just try to overwhelm his opponent even more. But king to h1, not a terrible move. Pawn to h5. We can all kind of assume that Nakamura is just going gangbusters over here, not trying to do anything except throw everything at his opponent. So that's what he continues to do. Pawn here to d6 capture or recapture here. Knight here to b5. I don't know that white necessarily needs to play this knight to b5 game. He's attacking the pawn here on d6, but there's not too much threat after pawn to a6. The knight comes back here to a3. I didn't even think coming back here to c3 makes sense. Knight to a3, yes, if you want to come back to c4 and then attack, even if you want to come up here to b6. But that's a lot of moves with so much going on, the king side of the board. You just don't really have all that much time. So knight on a3, it's just going to be sitting there for a while. Pawn here to b5, just kind of stopping a lot of those threats, so just kind of hanging out here. This is most of the reason why I just don't like this knight here to a3 move. But now the rook's going to come up here to c6, so Wesley says, hey, I'm going to get all up in your business over here, and it's going to be very difficult for you to do anything. Nakamura says, I don't care at all. I'm just going to keep throwing stuff at the king side, and just let's see if something cool happens. So pawn here to g4, queen here to c2, queen over here to f8, so Nakamura just lining everything up. Rook here to c1. So says, I don't care. I'm going to line everything up on the queen side, and we're just going to have a battle here. Bishop here to d7, a rook here to c7, getting it on that 7th rank. Definitely important for both sides to control that 7th rank, because Nakamura is going to be in huge trouble if he just allows his opponent to kind of overwhelm him here on the 7th rank. Bishop coming back here to e1. So starting to recognize that he needs to change a little bit up as far as defense. Also wants to kind of maneuver his bishop to do a little bit more than it was doing. Pawn here to h4. Nakamura continues to push forward. Now we do start to see a break open. So the pawn takes here on g4, and then pawn pushing forward. Just hey, let's just continue to break stuff up. Pawn to f3. So now they start to get a little space in front of this king right here on h1. Now we see a sacrifice. So knight taking here on e4, and then rook over here to d1. This rook on d1 is not doing anything at all. Just not doing anything productive whatsoever. I really don't know what Wesley So is doing, if he's just not sure of the pressure that's going on, but rook here to d1 just seems very, very poor to me. Now we see a rook sacrifice. So rook down here, taking on f3. Rook taking here on d7. Does not want to just take right away. There's problems with that as well. But rook taking on d7. Now the rook comes down here to f1. We see the king come up here to g2. Now the bishop comes here to e3, and this is kind of really, really bad. You know, if we come back and the bishop takes or something, the queen's just going to come down. This is checkmate. So there's a lot of moves that white can play. He actually plays pretty well in all these positions, even though he is already in tons of trouble. But king here to g2, bishop here to e3, and this is a dagger that you just have a hard time getting out of. There's no real great move here. So plays bishop here to g3, which actually looks kind of awkward. It's like you just giving up a pawn there. But really, what option does he have? He could play, because the threat is rook here to g1, if you're kind of wondering what Nakamura is trying to do. If you kind of block it with bishop here to f2, well then just rook takes, and then if the knight takes, the queen comes down, and then all of a sudden bishop here to f4 is just completely deadly. That's really bad. If we come back and say, okay, well, let's just go ahead and block it off with, let's say, the knight here to f2, then rook takes, bishop takes, now pawn to h3 is a pretty deadly move, and then king back here to h1, knight to f2, check. That's very bad. If the king were to take, a lot of different options, but getting the queen involved into the game, check. That's going to be very bad. Not a lot of options for white as well there. So if we come back, it's not great, but bishop here to g3 is the move we saw. Pawn takes here, and this pawn is now protected by this knight here on e4. So all these pieces really start to work together. Now the rook takes over here on f1. All you can really do is start to take material and hope for the best. Now knight here to h4, check. King up here to h3. Now queen to h6. Just so many threats. There's not much that white can really do here. Pawn up here to g5. Sure. Knight takes here. All these pieces are really protected really, really well. King here to g4. Knight here to f3. These knights are protecting each other. This bishop is protecting this knight as well. The king can take this pawn if he wants to, but then just the queen down here would be checkmate, so that's going to be bad. Definitely don't want to do that. We see knight to f2, king down here to h4. The king's going to come up here. And anytime, Wesley So, he could just tip his king over. He recognizes that he's probably in a losing situation. There's no way he can kind of get out of this. It was really nice to actually see him play on. Such a beautiful end game from Nakamura, all these different sacrifices to get his opponent's king all the way marching up the board. So really good to actually see sportsmanship of his fellow American actually playing this game out. But rook over here to f8 wants to make sure he gets all his pieces involved into the game. King up here to g6, rook down here to f6. Hey, why not an extra sacrifice at the end of the game? That rook wasn't doing anything, so let's just go ahead and sacrifice him to the king here. Now knight here to e4 check. And then after king here, then we see queen up here to g5 checkmate. You just never see checkmates very often, so it was really cool to actually see this. So fantastic game, just so much craziness going on. Really enjoyed this, wasn't expecting it at all. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this game, something rare that we see. Hopefully you enjoyed this tournament. Best tournament we're going to see all year as far as competition, so definitely interesting to see how these guys. Unfortunately, there's not the World Championship this year. We will have that coming back next year, so year off for that, so we kind of have to look forward to these big tournaments like the Sinquefield Cup. But everyone, thanks for watching the tournament, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.